Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me this week for a really special Resources of the Week. Today's resource is a podcast. It's an awesome podcast that I have been listening to for the last few weeks actually.
Oh, really?
I've been catching up on all of the episodes, called The Creating Space Project, and I'm here with the podcaster herself, Ruth Nelson.
Hi.
So Ruth, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to start the podcast?
Couple of things. One, I was a stay-at-home parent, which was a choice I was making, and I was really happy with that choice, but I got to a point of just needing something a little bit more cognitively. Also, it was about the time or in the wake of Julia Gillard, or it might have been sometime after that, but it really dawned on me. I have quite a privileged life. I embody a lot of privilege, so it took me a little while to go, if you can treat Julia Gillard, the leader of the country, in that way, you can treat any woman in the country any way you want.
Wow.
The things they said to her about the fact that she's a woman, and that doesn't mean I agree or disagree with her policies and the things that she did, it's that attack on her as a woman. You can do that to the Prime Minister, you can do anything you want.
Okay. So your podcast is primarily about women's stories. And I found so many of those stories really inspirational. I've listened to a couple of stories from Aboriginal women, and there was an episode recently that was on a woman who I believe is a lawyer talking about the issues in Timor-Leste. So tell me about how you find these women and how you interact with the topics that you're talking about on the podcast.
So I started from the position that someone pointed out to me that really it was only going to be people who identify as women and male allies who listen to a feminist podcast. And it was pointed out to me as well, though, that actually there is still so much work to be done within that space around intersectionality, around a white woman, a white Christian woman listening to a Muslim woman and going, oh wow, we have something in common. I didn't know that they loved their family just as much as me. It's I did, but really I didn't feel that.
Yeah.
So it was I just want as many different kinds of voices as possible to be telling their own stories. And actually, how do I find the women? Mostly I started with the people I know. I'm so fortunate to be in networks that just have the most incredible people. But also that assumption that if you listen to any person, they all have something to say. We all have something to say if we can be quiet long enough. Yes. And in a way, it doesn't matter what the story is that they tell, because if I'm interested in exploring values, every moment of our lives is imbued. Each moment is imbued with our values if we take the time to stop and examine them.
Awesome. How does your role as a psychologist working with Indigenous people, how does that influence the way that you approach the topics that you talk about on your episodes?
Another way of saying that is I'm fortunate enough to have First Nations people working with me and teaching me how to be a better psychologist and a better person.
What a great reframe.
I'm learning so much. I don't do the working with them. They work with me. They are so patient. My whiteness gets me. It gets me, and they gently point it out again.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. What was the question?
How does it influence the way that you approach some of the topics and some of the women that you talk to?
Well, I think the one way of describing a psychologist is we are a holder of stories. We hold stories. When people need someone to help them hold that, however heavy or however light that story, that moment is for them, if they've come to us to say, let's make a space where we hold that story. So I guess it shapes the way that I hold space with other people. I don't even know what I mean by that, but it's something about trying to just listen to the ways that I've learnt that people from different cultures and people from different kind of neuro pathways think differently.
Yes.
It seems obvious, but it's not just that our skin colour might be different. We're just as valuable as each other, and we think in really different ways. Yes. And I'm only going to discover that if I actually listen.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sounds like that genuine interest and that connection that you have with the people that you're talking to and the stories that they have is really core to what you do.
I hope so. I mean, I don't know if I always manage that, but I hope so. And I, you know, in being so privileged to journey with people who are Aboriginal, I'm sometimes not quite sure how to get that language right, but I hope that my intentions are genuinely, you know, generally quite genuine. One of the things I learned was, for the first couple of years in going out to where I work now, no one really asked me anything about myself.
Okay.
And initially, from my cultural background, I thought that meant that they weren't very interested in me as a person, or that I was kind of invisible in some way. And after a time, it was surprising to me that when I wasn't there, they were like, well, where were you last week?
Yes.
I was like, oh, they cared very deeply that I was there. And it took me a while to realize that it's like that superficial stuff in a way about, you know, I'm enculturated into saying, well, to signal interest in a person by going, oh, well, what do you do?
Yes.
And there's a first question. What, not who are you?
Yes.
What do you do? And I realized that in that space, I was just valued just for being there, not for what I could do, not for what I could offer. I mean, it was a good year or so before it came up in conversation that I was a psychologist. Because it was just irrelevant. I was a person.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
That's lovely. So a lot of people who watch some of these vlogs, a lot of them are health professionals, mental health professionals. A lot are actually just members of the public. So I'm wondering what they would get out of listening to some of your podcast episodes. What would be some of the points of interest that you're bringing to our audience, our Mindscape audience, from your podcast?
Oh, I have no idea. They'd have to listen and see if it was relevant for their lives. Who am I to know what's important to them?
Yep. Okay, that sounds lovely.
But good stories.
Yes.
Good stories.
Really
Stories hold us
interesting
together.
stories.
We're made of stories, right? Yeah, we're made of electrons and protons. We're little bags of sentient seawater. But what we've got is stories. Stories bring us together.
I think so.
Yeah.
So tell us where we can find out more about your podcast.
Creating Space Project. Just put it into the Google.
Put into the Google. So I know that there's a Facebook page,
Put it
and
into the Facebook page. Give
there's
it a like.
there's lots of interesting topics that are coming up that we're asking questions around. So yeah, Facebook page. I believe you're also on Twitter.
Yes, Creating Space Project.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So thank you everybody for listening and watching today, and thank you so much, Ruth, for joining me. And I hope that you guys can also tune into the Creating Space Project. I found it really, really invaluable to listen to all of the different stories, and also Ruth's wonderful insights and what she brings to it, as well as someone who facilitates the story gathering.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.